So he's just holding a grudge out in the field, and his father has to come get him. And his father says, "Your brother has come home." And he said, "Yeah, I see, your son is home." He didn't even claim him as his brother. He said, "Yeah, and I see, you're throwing this big party for him, and you wouldn't have even killed a goat for me." And the dad said, "All you had to do was ask. All the time, I would have given you anything. All you had to do was ask." And the story ends, leaving us to interpret how the man responded. Grace shows up in those places when we're living in a state of resentment or self-righteousness. You know, if you love someone and you're in a partnership, it's real likely that you'll have a little argument from time to time. Anybody? Or a big argument. Family, loved one, kids, whomever. And have you ever found yourself wanting to be right? Yeah, especially maybe when you know you're right. Well, it's easy to have that self-rightness. I'd rather be right. And yet that is the fourth one, because that's the one that is the most difficult one to penetrate, to break. Because if we'd rather be right or we'd rather live in resentment, then it's like it would be the equivalent to the man on the train when he heard the other man's story if he would have just said, "Whatever." Rather than let it touch me and move me. You see, grace is about moving us. I'll share a final story with you, and I'll tell on myself. Several years ago, I just knew I needed to go into church ministry, and I had some resistance around it. I thought, I'll just wait till I retire, and then I'll sort of do it part-time. But the universe there was something in me, maybe I was living beneath my potential, something wanted to be expressed. So I was kind of struggling with that idea, and I had the application. I had talked to Unity, and I had the application in my home, getting ready to fill it out. Well, at the same time, I was making some other changes in my life, and one of the things I was doing is having my house painted. And my father had always said, if you want to have your house painted, hand paint it. Exterior paint, hand paint, lots of layers. Don't spray on that watery paint. That was my dad's philosophy, and I believed it. So I was having my house painted, and I interviewed 3 or 4 different painters, and I found somebody who would brush paint the house, gave me a good price, and he started the work. I'd been home, working at home 3 or 4 days, and I noticed this guy was taking a long time on the prep work. I thought, when is he ever going to paint? Well, finally the day comes, and it just so happened my car was in the shop, so I was home, but didn't look like I was home. And the guy came to paint, and I'm upstairs working, and I hear water running. I looked out of my window, and I could not believe what I saw. What do you think was happening? He was spraying my house. I could not believe it. You know, in the South, they say, "Hell flew in me." That's a saying. I got so, and it takes a lot to get me angry. I got so angry. I flew down the stairs. I flew around the back of my house, and I said, "What the beepity beep beep are you doing?" And he said, "I'm painting your house." And I said, "We have an agreement. I don't want my house sprayed. Remember, I'm paying for hand painted." He said, "No, we don't. Go look at your agreement." Ooh, now I was mad. So now I ran in the house, I find the paperwork, I read it, and guess what? I had overlooked something. I don't know how I did it, but I had overlooked something. So when we signed the final copy, it didn't actually say he would brush paint it. So now I'm totally irritated with myself. So what do? I go outside and I scream louder. You know, what else do you do when you're in a situation? So I scream louder. I use more, but not very nice words. And I just told him, "Pack up your stuff, get out of my yard." We were screaming at each other. He packed up his stuff, he left, and his worker was left standing on a ladder. He left his guy standing on a ladder, and he was standing there, and I was standing there. And I was so angry at him, at me, at the whole situation. Well, I talked to this guy. We resolved it that day. So what happens, I go back in my house, and I sit down. Now, this is what I start hearing. "Darlene, you're thinking about being a minister?" Neighbors heard you. You said really things that weren't nice. What if you're a minister and somebody pisses you off like that? You could be in jail. The story just got worse. You know, you've got problems. You can't, you You've embarrassed yourself. You really should move. Just move. It just went on and on. And finally I said, all right, wait a minute. There's something going on here. And I knew enough to know that life happens. And God and grace are trying to find out, where are you living in fear? Where are you living beneath your patience? Where are you living in shame and despair? Where are you living in righteousness and self-resentment, or self-righteousness and resentment? So after sitting with it a day, I think, I called the guy and I said, listen, I want to apologize. I said things and I acted in a way that was very out of character. And I want to pay you what I owe you, but I did have a different understanding, and I'd like for us to just resolve this. And he said, fine, whatever, just mail a check to blah, blah, blah. And so I did that, and I trust, I did my part. But so often when we have those experiences, we measure ourselves by the experience. Do you see how I could have convinced myself? I had enough evidence to never go into ministry. I had enough evidence to believe that I could never do this or be that or whatever. But there was something inside of me that was saying, that's not you. You acted this way and you got this outcome. But you can choose again and take another action and let that action lead you to the outcome that you'd like to create. Grace is that presence that will not let us go. It will not let us settle for less. Grace is always saying, will you take one step that will move you closer to expressing who you know that you really are? This week, that is our invitation. Cerny, would you give me that song, the regular one? There's a song that some of you know that I'd like for us to share together as we enter into a time of meditation. And it says, how could anyone ever tell you that you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you that you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. Now, so often that anyone is that committee in our head that's trying to tell us that we can't or we shouldn't or will never be. As we sing the song and share a time of meditation, I invite you this week to examine your life and to take one step closer to fulfilling your true calling. How could anyone ever tell you you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. I invite you to close your eyes. And to check and inquire within. And when I ask these questions, just let the question in. Don't let your focus be to hear the answer right now. The focus is not to figure anything out. Right now, the question is to cultivate a willingness to let the questions in. And to trust that your mind and your heart are hearing these and are holding these. And from letting the question in,